going to put sidewalks there, it was check with them, try that option first. So I look at it like it was set in stone. I know walkability was important to the previous board, and I think it's still important to this board, but it's just a matter of, with that amount of money, is this the best use? And now's the time to say, if it could be spent somewhere else to make it more usable. And I don't know, that doesn't necessarily mean pedestrian study, saying how many people are walking this way compared to this way, and determining where that money should be spent. But
So just to be clear though, the way it was presented to the services committee was that they were going to put 6-foot extended shoulders on.
The motion, when it was before the previous board, was that we were going to give the residents the option to petition, but if they didn't, then we would put in the 6-foot shoulder.
Okay.
That was all wrapped into one motion.
So,
And so we had committed to that if the residents didn't petition for it.
I just want to be clear to say that the services committee, basically, the only thing that was brought to us, it was already been approved, was that we can put sidewalks in for less money than doing the extended shoulder.
Right, the
So
motion.
that's what we decided upon,
Right.
that we would do that. So
I'm in favor.
just so everybody's understanding, it wasn't this services board that said, hey, we want to do this or this, and we're going to do this. It was decided upon before. We're just bringing an option of doing sidewalks.
Because it saves
It's
money
cheaper.
and it's safer.
Plus, I think it's safer because you end up with a small green space between the edge of the road and the sidewalk. So you're not like riding right on the edge, so.
This motion is not to increase the spending by the 450,000. It's just to take the 450,000 for the extended shoulder and use it
Correct.
to pay for a sidewalk.
Correct. Correct.
I just want to see clarification that not to exceed 450,000, because this could easily turn into, and we're clear with no easements, no drainage ditch, culvert issues, because it looks like at the bottom of the hill, there's some drainage.
Usually when we do this, and we didn't have to do it, but we send to the road commission with their estimate that it's within 5%. If it's not within 5%, then we come and revote it, so I mean, we're gonna change from that, but that's kind of how they've done it in the past.
Okay. And that's my concern, because I
There's
don't
no
want us to
more
turn
than
into
5%.
$900,000.
5% would come back to the services committee then, utilities committee?
Well, if we haven't had that.
If it exceeds that 5%?
If it exceeds 5%.
Okay.
It was utility committee, but if it exceeds 5%, we would have to bring it back to the board at some point.
Okay.
I think a little bit would be the dollar amount
Okay.
that maybe exceeded for where we go.
Okay.
If it's 6%, I'm still good for it, I'm just saying.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying, so.
Likewise, we'll do sidewalk out. All right, so are you ready to vote?
Yes.
All right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? And it is passed. Item 14A, we added at the beginning of the meeting. It was Michael who suggested a discussion regarding 1300 Maplewood Drive. So, Michael?
I just had concerns. I kind of had a little bit of a panic attack last week, where I started thinking we're getting close to going through the phases of phase 1 environmental study, and there will be no phase 2. And I had a panic attack of if there's contamination and we are unable to get that paid for by the previous owner, however far back that was, that my taxpayers might be on the hook for, it could be $500,000 for cleanup. So I kind of panicked and wondered if I should call a special meeting for phase 2 a la carte, if you will, to get some soil samples, because after snuggling up next to a fire and reading all 170 pages of that environmental report, which was a lot of repetition, so it really wasn't that bad. But I didn't see anything in it that said this was the spot where refueling took place, and I don't believe they were driving a tractor down to the gas station on the corner every time they needed fuel, so fueling did take place. At what scale, I don't know, but that just tells me that they didn't see anything. There was no reason to believe that. But you know it happened at some point. They had to fuel these vehicles. Does it mean, thousands of gallons were spilled? No. But I just have concerns about the possibility of my taxpayers being on the hook for a very expensive cleanup, which was a concern. Also, the concern was, and Gary had mentioned, the pipeline. That easement is, I how does that impact the land, and what we can do with it, and then also there were a few easements that were clear.
Your concerns ripen into a motion?
I was gonna say, do we even have a motion list before I went to full-blown
We
discussion?
do not, no, it was your item.
I would make a motion to discuss 1300 Mayport.
Okay?
I
Just
support that.
discussion, anything is then to move to act and vote?
Well, you already did that when the roll call, you're already at that point. I guess, what is the, I mean, to me, I would expect some sort of action. You already have approval to discuss.
And I'm asking out of that discussion if there's a motion that you wish to make that relates to that subject.
I guess the motion would be to consider the purchase agreement of 1300.
Well,
I'm not sure how, I prefer to have more discussions.
Because that was my question when I brought it up before you brought it up. It seemed like it was being teed up for an action item. Are you suggesting that this purchase agreement should be rescinded? Or are you saying, because like the attorney writes here that there, you know, you can have other tests or inspections or examinations, and if we're dissatisfied with the results of that, we're allowed to back out of that? So are you suggesting that we take additional tests? Or are you saying that there's enough wrong with the purchase from what you've seen that the whole purchase was bad, and so we should be voting to rescind that or get out of the agreement? Do you?
And that's where I'm not exactly sure how I want to put that motion. Well, I guess I could just make the motion that we further the environmental studies, not a full phase 2, and then that would open for discussion on any other items that could amend that.
Okay, so additional environmental tests.
Yeah.
being performed. Okay. For the purposes of having a discussion, I would definitely second that.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded.
Yeah, I guess the reason I kind of wanted to open up the board discussion was just like I didn't want to call a special meeting, which would be $700 taxpayer money for us all to get together to discuss it. I don't know where it's going, but I just didn't want to miss the opportunity to make sure we do full due diligence before taxpayers come out for something that we're just not sure of. Same with environmental study. I don't know if we want to move forward with environmental study if it means $10,000.
Right.
And the easements, I guess there's a number of things that I want to make sure we're all in agreement that, hey, it is what it is, and I'm fine no matter where this thing goes, but I want further discussion.
I have a question. How many people have looked at that property? Have you seen all the junk around that barn? So I don't see anywhere in the contract we retained any money to make sure things cleaned up. They live in Massachusetts. So you're probably looking at, you could look at 15, 20 grand cleaning that place up. Just get the junk out of it. I didn't even go in the barn. I just drove around the property. That place is a disaster.
If I may, Gary, so you're aware of the allegation they removed by June. Your point is the enforcement mechanism, if they fail to do so, and the agreement's been signed.
Right.
So it's more chagrin about maybe what you would like to see more specifically, but it's not something that we can go to them now and say, hey, we need to amend the agreement that we've made with you and signed. That's,
I mean, that whole thing, we paid way too much money for that property.
I realize that there.
And I'm frustrated with that, but then when I drove down and I seen it, I was like, oh, who is gonna clean this mess up?
Can I ask for clarification? You said the agreement, because this wasn't already on the agenda. I don't think I've seen the agreement. You're saying that by June is what the agreement says?
By June, they have, if I remember the agreement correctly.
June 21.
Yeah, June 21.
And that's a concern I have, because if you buy a piece of property, you take occupancy the day you buy that piece. So we pay for this property, we take occupancy, and they're still living there. So why wouldn't we have them vacate the property at closing, before we would close on it? Why would we even think about giving them till June when we're gonna pay them before that? That's what I don't understand. I've never done a real estate deal like that where I gave somebody 6 months to move out after I bought the place.
I have, but, all right. You have plausible deniability, like I said, but I don't think we're here to rehearse again what we did the last time about people's misgivings about an agreement that you didn't.
I understand that.
All right, so,
But then I drove in after that meeting to go look at the property. Now I have misgivings just because of how the agreement's put together. I'm looking at this, if we're gonna spend $20,000 more to clean it up, with a bunch of dumpsters and a bunch of people to do it, now all of a sudden I'm like, why are we spending high-end dollars and we're gonna spend more money to clean it up? Because there's nothing in that agreement that's any retainage that I've seen of saying, we're gonna hold back $30,000 till you clean it up and remove all your junk, and then we'll pay you the less. This is not in the agreement.
and I think that you overstate in the sense you consider a foregone conclusion, that is, it is a possibility, and that is a possibility that you fear may come true, and it's in the agreement. I guess what I'd say is I think we have a proposed closing date of possibly December 15th, and maybe that soon. We've received an opinion letter, which frankly, some attorneys, I think we are notoriously somewhat squishy. I didn't find that agreement to be very squishy. It was, you've got the innocent purchaser defense, and I don't find you at risk for any previous contamination liability. I mean, it was pretty strong, and so I guess I'd like to know, since there's a motion for us to discuss it and the like, are we going to either vote to, as was mentioned, somehow rescind, or are we going to go forward with completion? I don't know, there's room to say we just have concerns.
Well, I mean, in order to develop what the appropriate remedy would be to answer that question, again, I come from the context of not knowing whatever discussions happened in the committee that brought this to the forefront, and not having been on the prior board, that you guys might have been, aware of other things, but just based on what's in here, there's, some potential issues about the environmental concerns and potential, liability. With the way that it's described here, with the theoretical worst case scenario and the responsibility that might fall on the township, is that we might have to take reasonable steps to prevent exacerbation of existing contamination and also to prevent human health impacts. Well, if you're talking about possible groundwater contamination, that is a significant expense. So although what I read this letter to say is that based on what we have so far, the phase one or whatever it would be called, environmental assessment that was done didn't seem to suggest, I didn't get a copy of that, so I don't know, but if I heard you correctly, when you read it, there wasn't necessarily a huge indication of any kind of contamination, but again, that's that top tier, that top level of environmental assessment. So in the end, if we might not only have an issue where, Gary, you're kind of referencing just more of a, was it a bad buy kind of thing, or a bad value, if we're on the hook, not just for $20,000 to clean some debris off the ground or off property, but if there is an issue that leads to taking, needing to take steps to prevent exacerbation of existing contamination and taking steps to prevent human health impacts, needing to take steps to prevent the human health impacts of groundwater contamination, that can be a huge cost. The only saving grace in that paragraph is he's saying in that event that the township could potentially have a cause of action against the company essentially that did the phase one assessment. However, what's not mentioned in here, but I mean, he does say, David, does say, potentially. The thing is, in most of these scenarios, I don't know how many of you have looked at the phase one environmental assessment contracts before, but in every single one that I've ever seen, the person doing that has it built in that we're waiving that liability if they've missed something. So, or it's somehow limited, or there's a, liquidated damages clause and it's like $1,000, right? Well, whatever. I mean, I haven't seen the contract, so maybe that doesn't apply here, but it's kind of left hanging that there's that implication that, well, if the worst case scenario happens, we might be able to go ahead and sue the company that provided that phase one analysis. But then again, phase one analysis is phase one for a reason. It's not like what you would think of as a home inspection, where you would think a home inspection is a home inspection is a home inspection. Phase one is meant to do more of a surface or cursory review as compared to a phase two. So if there's issues, again, you read 170 pages that I didn't read, but based on this letter, I would think at the very least we would want to do some additional testing. Now, if that testing is $10,000, and then we're still planning on moving forward, and we have $20,000 of cleanup, well, then, I don't know, so I can see that there'd be problems with that, but I'd be curious, at the very least, if not concerned about the second to last sentence in this letter that says, at present, and my understanding is this was written on Friday, at present, we are awaiting a revision to the title commitment to add the winter taxes, which that's understandable, it's a finite thing. Then also to correct or update several other items. So what else needs to be corrected or updated at that point? Are there other concerns that we need to be aware of that would potentially fall into this paragraph of all the reasons why we would be allowed out of the agreement? So I don't know who would have the answer, if you or Dan, I'm not sure if anybody here has the answer to that.
I don't think this is the forum we should discuss that in depth, if that's your desire to opt out of the agreement.
Well, I guess the problem I'm having is I don't have a desire either way without having the information. All I was given was essentially a letter and an email and going, whoa, there's obviously a lot more going on than I know about.
I mean, you were talking about something here, depending on which direction you're trying to go here, it could affect how we end up in that direction. So that's the part I'm trying to be careful about.
Okay, I'm sorry, I don't think I followed you on that, but,
I mean, we have a signed agreement with the seller,
right,
and there's some concerns about certain conditions of the agreement. Purchase price isn't one of the concerns that's really a factor. If there's concerns about the environment, what are you trying to do? Do you want to have those questions answered? Or are you trying to pull out based on what you know already? If that's the direction, that's something we're looking to know. The answer to all the what-if questions, you would never buy a piece of property anywhere with all the what-if questions that are thrown out to you tonight. Now, I agree this property has a lot of junk on it, and we could hold up for an escrow, clean up some of the junk just to guarantee it's done. That's a whole little different issue. But every parcel we've ever purchased, you're going to have what-if scenarios that you're never going to have answered. If you say water contaminants, how are you going to, that you're going to have with every parcel. You're never going to buy anything if that's the standard you're holding to. So phase 2 usually comes, and you're more experts than I am, but at phase 2 you have these questions. And so before we're going to give you a clean bill of health, we need to answer these questions. Well, our phase 1 didn't call out any areas for additional review for a phase 2. So when you talk about doing a phase 2, we're going to need to know if we want more work, what boundaries do you want to come from? Because our initial assessment doesn't call for any additional work. Do you want to have soil borings done everywhere? That's going to affect the cost. How in-depth do you want to get? Do you want to have water samples? It can get pretty in-depth to verify. It's just, that's the hard part. We need to know what you want. But if you have concerns about following through the sale based on what you know, I think that's the direction we should know about now. If you're just concerned about the environment, you want them satisfied, we're going to go through the sale, well then, what is it going to take to address those concerns? I mean, because if we get 10 soil borings, it's 32 acres. And are you going to then look and say, well, that's one for every 3 acres, is that enough? So it's hard to, what are you looking for? We're going by what the board already decided. The board decided to move forward with this agreement. The other items are, the attorney we have is very good with the property, and he's just clarifying certain documents that are recorded, certain issues of previous deeds, and making sure all the right signatures are followed through. There's some questions of some legal descriptions that on previous deeds, and just making sure that kind of stuff gets cleared up. So we won't close without those things. And that's what some of those other questions are there to get the title, make sure the title is clear. This has been 3 generations of family members on this parcel, and so that caused, and several have passed away, so that's caused a few things that just got to get cleared up.
Did I hear, was it just an idea or, an example of something that could be wrong, but I heard you use the word easement in the list of things that there was a concern. Is there something that you're concerned about with an easement?
And that's what I had asked Dan about. There would be
Clarifying some descriptions on easements. There is a gas line easement that goes through there. We know where that is. That's very clear, and we've known about it a lot. We're adjacent to that too, but there was some in the description just clarification, he was looking with the title work documents to, well, those easements, so,
Have they done ton of work yet?
yes.
Dan, do you think that it's possible we could get some retainage for cleanup of that property? Yeah.
I think we could certainly ask for an escrow as long as.
I seriously, you know, you can say you can trust people, here's the deal, I own rentals, and I get a security deposit. People will walk away from that thing, and I can spend a whole lot more money cleaning that apartment than what that security deposit will pay for, so
I'm not disagreeing with you, that
I'm
would be
just-
wise to get an escrow, yes.
I think,
We can say from the resulting environmental report, we want to have an escrow that these things are all removed. It's fine.
I mean, certainly, depending on the things that have been there, but if it's a family, if it's been a family property for 3 generations and there are already some potential concerns and you're seeing things that just from the outside without even going into a barn, I mean, it makes sense that, you know, there could be potential, if they clean it up, that can
It's
resolve.
rented to 4 different people right now for small segments of it, and so that's part of the issue. Some of that property that has to be cleaned up belongs to some of those tenants.
Okay.
And so that's part of the, give them time to get it all cleaned up before they come through and finish it off. That's part of the concern, and that's part of why it's addressed later in the meeting. Are we gonna rent any more to additional tenants? We wanted that, and that's the question we're asking. Are we gonna continue that? Because that affects what gets cleaned up and, other property, and when their property has to be removed.
is there currently a motion on the floor?
It's, yeah.
There is, but I'm not quite sure I follow it totally. Maybe it can be repeated. Is it changing our trajectory here toward a closing?
Well, I think the motion
I
was,
think there's, I guess, the environmental concerns, if it warrants moving forward with phase 2 out card.
The motion we have before us is to perform additional environmental work.
do we have any cost about what that, what you said? I mean, I understand that there's, if we do 1 soil sample per, 3 acres, that's a different cost if we want every 10 feet, or, I understand, but just to have a basic phase 2 done, do you have any kind of estimate?
Well, a basic phase 2, like I said, would be specific to an area. Hey, we had a concern here, there was something happening, so that's 1 acre.
Right.
We could spend $10,000 on a phase 2 for a certain specific area or a certain specific issue to start getting soil samples, to dig it out. It's hard to speculate when you're looking for a needle in a haystack, but you don't know if there's a needle there. They're going to say, what are we looking for?
Right.
We don't know.
Is your best estimate with that, all that we've talked about then, and not knowing exactly what we'd be looking for, is it your best estimate that it would probably be less than $10,000 for us to do something like that?
No, it's my estimate that you would not be satisfied with anything because we don't know what we're looking for, any boundaries. That's why I was trying to find out, what are you looking to be satisfied with? If you're going for all the what ifs, that's not possible. It'd probably be, getting quite expensive to start digging up and testing everything. If you're just saying, hey, there was one little spot you want you to check, then yeah, that's much less expensive. That's when you can talk about, hey, we can do a sample there, yes, but you don't know where that spot is.
And that was my concern from the original report. They didn't specify any spot where fueling took place. There's fuel storage, which farms typically have a pretty high, 400-gallon storage tank that they keep fueling. So by them not saying, they didn't find it. So they didn't recommend phase 2 because, we didn't find anything. We didn't find any chemical mixing area or herbicides. We didn't find any fuel station tanker abandoned to justify a phase 2. So, and that's why it would be difficult. I would say, if it was me, I'd say I'd look at the well, the drinking well, that'd probably be a spot, because I'll sample that water. I would look around areas in the barn for any signs of where something might be. I wouldn't say just go out in the field and start dropping samples here and there. I think probably them, based on their experience, kind of get a pretty good idea where operations would do such work. But my fear is spending $10,000 on taxpayer money. I'm not on a goose chase, but I want to make sure I'd rather lose $10,000 than $500,000.
Right.
Is my concern, and I don't want. Is it worth it? And I guess that's up to for the board to decide if that's worth it. If it's my personal property, I would do all my due diligence and I have that stuff cleared up beforehand, and then I take that risk and say I can't spend $50,000 chasing down the what ifs. And when I say what ifs, they are what ifs. It might be fun. Probably fun. I'm not sure. I don't know farming, so I'm not sure what kind of chemicals they use. 4 years ago.
I'd like to call for a vote, but I'm not really sure what that looks like. I would just say that we know we have 3 people from the fire board that, based on last meeting, have not changed position. And so it seems to me if we're looking for building a consensus to negate the contract, that we'd be better served, if that's the will, to do so without a lot of additional expenditure, and not use that as some sort of cover for a potential termination. So it seems to me you either want to move forward, you don't, or you may want to be more specific about your motion.
Yeah, I was just gonna ask you about, the thing that I heard you say, well, cleaning up the barn, and that'd be part of yours as well, but it seems like you're talking about a well. Is there only one well on the property?
I think it listed one specific drinking well, or,
I'm not sure.
I mean, so I'm just wondering if you're trying to specify then that for the purposes of what you would be concerned about, are you essentially trying to have your motion narrowed down so that it would be for the cost of just testing that sampling of that water and whatever ties into the cleanup of that barn so that we're sure there's nothing in there that could potentially be a environmental hazard?
I don't think the cleanup of the barn, I'm worried about environmental, I'm just worried about aesthetic costs. Because I look at it and go, there's a lot of junk around here. I mean, to clean that up, you're gonna spend a lot of money. You're looking at lots of dumpsters and lots of help, because it's a mess.
I guess my thought is if that's what your thought is, at least as far as the water is concerned, is just to do some water sampling, I can't imagine that would be that costly because it's not a full phase 2.
It depends what you want to test for. Usually the environmental phase 1 says they use this chemical on that site, so do a water sample or do set to test and see if there's that chemical there.
Gotcha.
But they didn't say that, so that's why it was really hard for us to know what you want to do. Because it doesn't say, hey, you're looking for arsenic or you're looking for this.
Right.
Yes, if we were only looking for arsenic, it would be less expensive, but if it's, PFAS, are we looking, what are we,
Right.
starts adding more things to the list.
I would think, from them doing a lot, they have a pretty good idea when we're looking at farm operation. There's certain things they're looking for, because they've done thousands of them over the past. So they kind of know it's different than if they're looking at a corner gas station, where now they're looking for something completely.
To give an analogy you kind of looked at, it's sort of like asking the architect, why don't you build us something over there? What would you do? And, I'm just saying it's very vague. They will have a broad scope. Well, we can check this, we can check this. They'll be happy.
Oh, and that's the other problem, it's like, we'd like to run 1,000 different chemicals.
They'll be happy to test.
And that's why, if I were to do that, I would probably put a price tag limit of $10,000 or something. But on the other hand, I don't want to spend $10,000 if the board's vision is just like, no, we want to get away from this thing. Then it's just wasting money. I don't have a problem with the actual cost. I know they overpaid. The township has a track record of overpaying. I've learned to live with that. The cleanup, I think there should have been a contract that is explicitly stated that they will clean up, and if not, they have to pay a certain amount for.
Well, then do you want to revise your motion to be that? Because I feel like that is something that we can vote on and move the agenda forward.
Yeah.
I feel like we're just sitting and spinning our wheels. Do you know what I mean? I don't mean to be disrespectful at all, but I feel like we're sitting and spinning our wheels, and talking in circles about it. And so I think that, Michael, if you're the one that added this to our agenda and made the motion, and so if you wanted to revise your motion to include $30,000 to be put in escrow, and not released until property cleanup was completed, after the tenants who have been working on that land after their leases end, that all the cleanup has happened. That feels like something we can vote on. I haven't heard a motion on this topic yet that feels like something that's votable.
I think that would be, I agree, I think, and I appreciate the way that you kind of pulled together exactly what you said, what the concerns that Gary said, so I don't know if that's your thought, but that seems like a really good way to move forward with it, and hopefully he already grabbed exactly what her word was.
We either have to withdraw the motion that's on the table, Or the motion maker has got to amend that motion right now. Because we can't be adding motion on top of motion.
Well, that's what
So
I was.
I've been waiting for this motion to be voted on, so we can bring another one. So,
Unless you want to amend yours to simply.
either way,
that she-
either way.
You like to clean up, I will pull back my motion. Do we have support?
I did, yeah, you could amend it if you would choose to
I
do
don't
so.
want to deal with amendment.
You want to move your motion?
That's not one of my issues. I don't have a
Okay.
problem with that.
Support moves the motion?
If you want to withdraw your support from
I
that.
can withdraw my
Okay.
support, yes.
Withdraw mine.
Then I will piggyback what Becky said, to make a motion that we negotiate a $20,000 retainage to be paid after June 21 if the property's cleaned up. That'll give them time to do that. By June 21, we're gonna get through winter here, I'll give them a spring to clean it up, and we'll retain $20,000.
Are you comfortable that being held by the title company?
Pardon?
Are you comfortable that's escrow with the title company?
Yeah.
I'm just saying that might be a concern of theirs, as long as it's neutral party holding it, so I'm just trying to address that.
Before that second,
If she balks, she just have Catherine call me.
before that second, I just want to clarify then with Gary, because we can't legally say, this is a stipulation, now if you don't agree to it, we're done.
I get
This
it.
is a
No,
request. Okay,
no,
this is a
this is a request.
It's a request.
This is a request
Sure.
that they would let us retain $20,000 of that property be picked.
Mr. Chair, I think you could add it along, because it's mentioned in phase one of the environmental. So you could mention it, and to me, that would be the part of a concern that we receive, because we're subject to reviewing the environmental report. So this, you can have this as it came out of the environmental report, it mentioned these items that need to be cleaned up.
Sure.
And so, to agree, we want this as an escrow
Sure.
setup.
Yeah.
So, to be paid when those things are cleaned up, which they agree in the agreement anyway.
And if they refuse?
Well, then that's something we'll have to decide at that point.
And I just want to clarify what the motion is, because there's no second yet. The presumed motion or suggested motion was 30,000, were you saying 20,000?
I think $20,000 would cover it. Let's just be fair. We get to, 30,000, we're looking at 10%. $20,000 is a negotiable number.
Okay, I would second that.
I mean, I want to be fair with all the parties, so.
Okay, it's moved and seconded, we've had a lot of discussion. I'm not convinced necessarily that if we have a closing date staring us in the face that this, let's say they flat out reject it, would somehow then entitle you to another 30 days and the luxury of being able to sit down again in January and discuss this without being in breach of the contract. So it's almost one of those where you're better off saying, I authorize Dan as our representative to try to negotiate that.
Yeah.
If he's able to, great. If he's not, we have a binding contract.
Right. So we'll hold them to it.
Right.
We'll have to hold them to it.
Yeah, it's same with my motion too, it's just, I want to see if there was support to do that study. I'm not comfortable, but I voted against this one, see, I voted out, and I didn't get support, so I just, that is a fear, it's a maybe, but I just want to put it out here.
Okay, so we've had, Gary's motion's been seconded. Let's call for a vote then. All in favor? Motion is,
A point of order, a couple of times tonight when we've done the, whatever, I'll say aye if you're in favor. I often am missing, I'm basically delayed hearing, and so by the time I'm catching on to what is being said, there was at least one motion tonight and another motion last week that I didn't hear you in time, and by the time I went to say nay, you were talking on something, and so I know last week's or 2 weeks ago was recorded as a unanimous vote, so I just, if we could do roll call just for the purpose of making sure that I'm not missing the opportunity to vote either way, because I have to vote.
so that I understand, are you asking for roll call votes from this point forward on all matters at all future meetings?
Unless you have another suggestion, that was the only one Dan gave me.
I mean, she presented, she was unable to hear properly what it is. Any board member has a right to request a roll call, and we have to do it, so.
Sure, I'm just thinking as it relates to that, the problem isn't so much hearing your fellow members and as they vote in unison, it's knowing what's being voted upon.
Well, correct, to be able to know that,
So maybe it's a matter of my being clearer, louder, more articulate, or whoever it is, so that you know, when I say, okay, all in favor, you know that what I'm asking about.
Sometimes it's just the speed. I mean, it has happened several times. Like Becky said, I don't mean this as disrespect to you. It's just the speed at which things are happening. I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm struggling to, especially if I'm not staring at your mouth, because I read lips. If I'm happen to be looking down at the documents that we're talking about or whatever, and then I catch on it, oh my gosh, I think okay, I was gonna vote. And I don't want to get in the butt that we have to do a call vote every time. I just ask Andy because I don't know how else to address it, to make sure that I'm actually voting yes or no on every single motion.
Jim, often you do this thing, and I'm just an observation as a bystander.
Right.
Often you do this thing where you say, okay, are we all ready to vote? And you look to your left and you look to your right, and then we do.
Sure.
And it feels like when that happens, if our rhythm could become that happening and making sure that you have eye contact from all of us or a nod that we're ready to vote, then it might work more in Katherine's interest for us to all in favor say aye versus roll call. But then some other times you don't have that pause. You say, okay, it sounds like we're ready to go, all in favor say aye.
You want to know why that is? Because sometimes, some of you have the habit, and the previous board too, if I'm looking this way and that, you feel compelled to speak. And I feel like we're ready to vote, and I'm almost begging you to say more. And that's why I have tended to.
We could all just agree though, that if Jim says, are we ready to vote, then he's looking for a nod or a head shake down the table. And then I think that would be faster than us roll calling all the time, but still meet the need that Katherine is articulating. Would we try that?
Let's try that. All right, so the motion, as it's been articulated by Gary, and I believe seconded by Katherine, is before you for a vote at this time. And can we voice vote then? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign, aye. All right, and that has passed, and you will apply your best understanding of what was just passed. All right. Item 15, request to extend the use agreement for the 44th Avenue soccer field. Is there a motion to approve a one-year extension of that use agreement as recommended by the Services Committee?
I'll make a motion to approve the one-year extension of the agreement as discussed in services.
Second.
Okay, it has been moved and seconded. Is there a discussion among the board on this item?
Yeah, I'll just say, they've been with us now, is it 2 years?
They had exclusive use for the past year, but then kind of shared use for 2 years prior to that.
Okay. It is the Hornets Soccer Club. They've been a great tenant, very respectful, no complaints whatsoever. I know in the past when I was on services, they had asked for a 3-year extension or a 3-year contract, just for scheduling and just so they could plan for the future. They've been phenomenal, no complaints. I'm not sure why they didn't ask for 3 years this time, but they would be interested in 3 years.
They would definitely entertain a 3-year.
So I would just make an amendment to change that from 1 year to 3 year. I believe we have a 30-day, or we have severability, so that's the other thing. Now we're not locked in.
I would support that amendment.
And that is premised on Rod's representation that he expects they want a 3-year. Okay. All right. Any discussion on the motion, I guess, that's before you now, by way of an amendment? Yes, to the original motion. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? All right, and so the original motion has been amended. It's been amended to make it a 3-year extension. Is there any discussion now on the motion as amended? Hearing none. Ready to vote? Yeah. Good job, Hornets. Good job, Hornets, wherever you're watching, if you are. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? All right, the item is passed. 16, I might just give a preface that I would like to see this table, but anyone wish to address item 16, what I call the cart before the horse?
The one thing that I would say about 16 is that our conversation in services, Ryan and mine, was all contingent upon the ink drying on the page of the deal. But this conversation had to do with all of the junk on the property, much of which the property owners say is owned by some other people who have been using that property, who have been farming that property. And so it was moving in the direction of severing most of those relationships, because they weren't our relationships, but severing most of them, but limiting Roger Victory to be the one that we will continue to let farm the property, contingent upon the ink drying on the page. So I'll make that motion to allow farming on the property to be limited to Roger Victory as recommended by the Services Committee.
I support that.
Okay, moved and supported. Discussion.
I'm just wondering, is there already some kind of context or document, a proposed agreement, anything like that? This is the one item I didn't see any kind of attachment.
We had the late services committee. This is one of the difficulties with the Thursday late meeting that goes late, and then we prepared the agenda kind of in scrambling. There was a little communication issue that I didn't intend for this to come to you today originally. I wanted the service committee to meet because they only meet, once a month, but I wanted a little direction from them. So we aren't prepared with a lease or anything. We have to do that before you. So that's my fault that it came to you. We haven't even talked to Roger that he wants to, because we don't own the property yet. We can't talk to him yet. So the cost, the rent is quite low for farmland. It's not very high. So we've in the past, for the other land we've owned, wanted it to be maintained as opposed to us mowing it. And so that's really kind of what we're looking at here until the township decides what to do. Let them have it for a year to keep it mowed so it doesn't turn into a wild field. That's what we were thinking. But we really don't have anything prepared for you tonight.
Given the late hour, would someone have the mercy upon us to possibly withdraw?
I will happily withdraw my motion and table this.
Is that, will be second?
I think whoever seconded me originally has to withdraw that too, right?
Okay. All right. Okay, so we will take that up in the future discussion. Item 17, public notice for senior transportation program relating to a publication part of the process of pursuing a grant. So I wish to make a motion for the board to consider this.
I'll make a motion to approve the publication of notices, which is part of the process to pursue obtaining the transportation grants as recommended by Services.
It's been moved. Support? I'll support. Discussion.
Actually, what is this? Just, these are monies that we're spending, or what are these?
So the transportation, senior transportation program receives grant money from MDOT
Yep.
to help run their program. So there's a cycle for renewal of equipment. So they're coming due for renewal of their computer equipment, which is the 4,900. They have the minivan. The minivans are 4 years or 100,000 miles. So they have a minivan that's coming due on the 4-year mark. And then the $48,000 is regular transportation funds that are used to offset our per trip fee for transportation that we provide.
Are we doing those trips yet with COVID?
We are doing some medical. And what they did this year with COVID, because that program also services the senior center for their senior trips, because those have cut down. They doubled the money we're getting in 2020 per trip, because they know it's more emergency medical.
Okay.
I shouldn't say emergency, but more medical.
So I don't know if I missed the answer to his original question there, but is this, it appeared to me this was just essentially a proposal to seek grant funds, but not a commitment for us to spend our own funds? Is that correct? Okay.
Yeah, and the beauty of it is actually, so the 55,000 that's in there for the replacement minivan, when we order that minivan, we pay for it, we get reimbursed, but then we sell the old van and we get to keep that money.
Sounds great to me, I'm ready to go.
So last year, we sold one for $13,000.
Okay.
And that went back into the program.
All right, so board ready to vote on this motion?
As we say, do we need any more clarification? So the number of trips, we have to hit a certain amount of trips to keep qualifying for.
No, so to get the full grant money, it's based on 13,000 trips. So it's about $3.70 a trip. So like last year, we had 12,528 trips. So we got 370 on 12,528 trips. So we did lose some money on the table, but it's better to go that way. If we go the other way, then we lose that subsidy per trip. As soon as we get over that.
So this is just a maximum subsidy, essentially?
Yeah.
Okay. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed?
Aye.
Okay. The motion is carried. Items 17A and B, these are important, paying our bills as a township. Items 10.1 and 10.2, if you will. 10.1 being the November 30, 2020 Township Board meeting minutes. And seeking approval of those minutes. So I will ask if anyone would make a motion to approve the minutes.
Well, I guess for clarification or ease of motion upon motion and amending motions, I would make a motion that we approve